One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. I'm here at the 2019 MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, and I'm joined by Henry Abbott, founder of TrueHoop. TrueHoop started as a blog, and ESPN acquired it, and it grew into one of the best storytelling and digital media companies and parts of ESPN. Greetings, Henry. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ty.
Now, Henry, TrueHoop started as a blog, right? Which started in 2005, acquired by ESPN in 2007, grew to have a huge following in terms of you're a writer and video and audio aspects of everything. And then most recently, you branched out on your own from ESPN here in 2019. So I guess the question I have for you is tell us a little bit about TrueHoop. I think you focus mostly on the NBA, why you started it, why ESPN acquired it, and now you're branched off. Why have you decided to branch off and do things on your own?
I was writing for magazines, mostly, about the NBA. I mean, I wrote for a lot of different things. I worked at CBS News and did all kinds of journalism stuff. And the internet was becoming increasingly a place people got news. I didn't really think I'd ever be a blogger. That seemed like a pretty dorky thing. But my buddy Alex convinced me at a Christmas party. He hauled me into the corner and started a blog in my name. And he's like, you should be doing this. And I was like, but Alex, I'm not a dork, so I can't have a blog. But it was 2004 probably at that point. But then I kind of looked into it more, and I realized, this is vibrant. It was just, people were, I would write things for magazines, and it was like it died. It would just go away, and you'd never hear it about again. But online, I was like, people are commenting on it, and then I started hearing from people in the NBA about stuff I was doing. And quickly, it was crazy. I was like, okay, this seems like, just my spidey sense was like, this matters. We should be doing this. I should learn about this. So I put myself through some kind of amateur education on how to do this well. And then I started this thing called TrueHoop. I convinced my buddy to go in with me. So we owned it 50-50, and I did all the work, and he gave me some money. And it was weird. It was we won a Forbes award when it was a few weeks old as the best of the web. And then I got calls literally the caller ID said Google. I thought it was some kind of weird spam or something. And they were like, oh, this is Google. And we were wondering if you'd be willing to come in and talk to us about why your website's growing so fast. I was like, what? And my main thought was I heard they had a really good cafeteria. And I was like, I think I can get a really cool lunch out of this. So I was like, yeah, of course I'll come. It was Google in New York. And then I went there. I did meet with them, and I saw the cafeteria, but they didn't ask me to stay for lunch. I was there at 10 in the morning. This is a big... So the whole thing was a waste of time. No, but it just got this lucky ride. The philosophy I had was that sports media fit into certain tidy lanes. There was a game story, a column, and it all just felt very stale and boring, and the stuff I actually knew from actual people in the NBA just didn't fit the mold. It was different stuff. It was true. It seemed like it mattered. It felt like everyone else was being a little... I don't think there was a lot of lying going on, but there's just we just kind of don't talk about this. And I was like, well, if it matters, I don't want to just dig up dirt just to dig up dirt, but if it's things that matter, let's just try to make evidence-based. I'll take evidence-based positions, not positions to take positions. And it resonated in some weird way. It ended up, there was this World Wide West, William Wesley investigation ended up being a big deal. And then it's there was stuff about it in GQ and, on radio and blah, blah, blah. And then ESPN called it. But a couple years after I started, ESPN acquired TrueHoop, and then I covered the NBA there in the same format. And then a few years into it, several years into it, 6 or 7 years in, they asked me to take over the NBA coverage. This was a big management job, 60 people, digital and print, covering the NBA. And so I had a couple years of being in lots of meetings. And it was amazing to see data. It's not a hobby of mine, really, but the fact is, if you run a newspaper or a magazine or a radio show or anything non-digital, through the whole entire history of journalism, the fact is nobody's ever really known what worked and what didn't. But only this thing, where now every individual story, just like this podcast we're doing right now, you'll have data on this podcast, right? And that's a feedback tool where you can learn a hell of a lot. And so this was this time of change. It was still the whole media world's going through it right now. Just like everything that we thought we knew worked is not what worked. And what's working is different weird stuff. We probably all know somebody who's like 12 and spends all the time on watching YouTube. And you might think like, well, that's not media, but that's totally media. Like that's our competition right now as we're doing this, right? And we have to understand that. We have to understand what thrills humans. And it's not, like in the third quarter there was a 14-2 run. Like that's just not like, I don't know if anybody ever liked that. I know that as soon as we could start measuring it, everyone's like, yeah, no.
Yeah, that has to go, right. I wonder, Henry, when you started it and you were looking at what was out there and saying, is that credible? I mean, what was your filter at that time? I mean, how did you determine what would be credible? You said research-based, but how did you determine what people would like? I mean, basically you look at regular media and then you say, I have a different way of thinking about this. Tell me about your process there.
I think now I have, through hard work, developed more cards to play, but I really started with, there were times where just with what I knew, with actual sources telling me actual things, every now and again you'd see everyone in the media reporting something, and then my little voice inside was like, oh, no. That was like my go sign. When I'm going, oh, no. Then it's like, okay. It's like, it feels a little bit like, let's say you have a bunch of people over your house and then everyone goes home and there's a giant mess. Like party's like, well, I guess I got to do this. Like, I felt like that. I was like, okay, if we're all going to go with the story that I'm struggling right now to think of a good case study. William Wesley's a good one, right? Like everyone in the media is like, oh, William Wesley's very powerful, right? It's like, well, what does he do? It's like, oh, we're not talking about that. And it's like, well, who's going to talk about it? Who's going to figure this out? Who's going to explain that, right? And it's not thrilling to me. I'm not looking for these salacious things, but it's like, look, if we really think he's crazy, crazy important, and we're the journalists, we better go ask these questions, right? We better go try to figure this out. I don't know if I did a good job of it, but I know that I was asking that question because I thought it mattered, right?
That nobody wanted to ask, right? I read that Worldwide West story, and it was very informative. I was actually impressed with it. You move into ESPN, and you move into this management role, right? It's like becoming a head coach. I can't coach the DBs anymore, right? How was that?
It was a big shift. I was kind of a lone wolf. I never moved to Bristol. The whole time I was writing there, I was writing either at an event like this or at the NBA Finals or in the little town I live in New Jersey in my office, right? And then suddenly I'm not just a manager, but a manager at a big company with a lot of people above me and a lot of people below me. And you have no idea how much time I spent logging into different things, just to approve the travel expenses for 60 people. You spend a lot of time just and you're responsible for all this stuff. So you got to be on top of your game. You can't be wasting a lot of time. I became aware that being a total jerk is the same. You act the same as being in a big hurry. And I was in a big hurry all the time. I just was so I didn't love all that, but I learned, amazing education. They paid me a good salary to learn stuff that I would, to practice getting better at things I was bad at. I'm very thankful for that because now I have those skills, right? And I was by design, the reason you'd hire someone like me to do a job like that is to change stuff. They asked me to change ESPN. I had a friend when, or a little corner of ESPN. When I was offered that job, I took a weekend to mull it over and I called a wise friend. And he was like, a lot of times when people ask for change, they later decide they didn't want change. He's like, so just keep that in mind.
But they accepted it, though. You came in and changed things.
We did change a lot
Things
of stuff.
Expanded.
We did.
And that's a big transition. We talked earlier offline, and you talked about the transition from being purely, when you started, you wanted everything to be evidence-based. Whatever I talk about, I'm going to make sure that there's credible research out there that says this. Yeah. And then you realize that telling stories actually is what fans engaged in, right? Not lying, you're telling a story, storytelling. And that relates to what a lot of the people who listen to this podcast do in college athletics, right? You want to engage the fans, engage alumni, engage future student athletes, engage the students on campus. You want to engage these folks, and storytelling is probably one of the best ways to do it. Tell us about that transition that you made from how you initially thought about things, and then telling stories and your thoughts on storytelling now in media and basically in engaging audiences.
Yeah, this is for sure like the most valuable thing I know that I've learned, and I don't think a lot of people know it. Like, there's a lot going on in what you just said. So, from the beginning of the independent days of the TrueHoop blog, like, I was just seeing surprising things. Like, everything that like my journalism professors were like, no, that's a good story, that's an assignment. Like, those ones were like, and every now and again, I remember early on, I wrote a story about how, and by the way, it happened again today. Almost every time somebody tells a story about I saw an NBA player in public, what happens next is they say, yeah, I was at the Cheesecake Factory. That's how that sentence goes. And you hear it once, whatever. But I have a job where people would, if they saw me, they would tell me where they saw an NBA player, right? This happened a lot to me. And I was like, what the hell is going on with the Cheesecake Factory? Like, what's the story? At that time, maybe the most popular thing I'd ever done. As my capital J journalist heart was like, well, this isn't outrageous. This is a stupid story. It's just like, it doesn't win NBA championships for anybody, right? But why is it popular? Well, because you and I go to the Cheesecake Factory. That's a story about us, right? That's why we like it. It's because we like stories about us. So that was like one early clue. The way digital traffic goes, by and large, is everything's about the same, except for some things are like 5,000 times more popular, right? Which is weird. It's like, in the NBA, it would be the equivalent of like everybody scores 2 points and one guy scores 5,000 points, right? You kind of have to start to ask, like, what's going on with that guy? And I can tell you it's not tidy. It's not like, oh, people like stories about this player, or people like stories of this length, or with this kind of photograph, or this social media treatment. Like, none of those things explain what I'm talking about. These are the ones that become movies. These are the ones that are just, everybody's talking about that day. And if you're not the thing that everybody's talking about, it's not like there's like a 40% of that. There's like, no, you're down in the soup with everybody else, right? Well, I just started, whenever I came across one of those stories, I would just print it out and put it in the pile and read it again and again and put it the other ones and try to figure out what's connecting these stories together, right? Like, what's similar about these? Because it was not any of the easy to find theories. And I developed some personal theories about it, and then I convinced ESPN to let me start a whole team where we would try those theories out. And it was called True Presents, and we made all of the features on the NBA for ESPN.com and the magazine for a couple of years, and we killed it. And really what it is like, people in Hollywood, people in, the very, very fine magazine editors and stuff, they know about stories where like, oh, we're looking for characters and struggle. We're looking for all these things. You could buy a Hollywood movie script and find like a lot of the basics of it. We just looked for these pitches that, we had a lot of very plugged-in writers, total geniuses, Jackie McMullen, Baxter Holmes, Tom Haberstroh, Kevin Arnott. It's like, these people know a ton about what's happening in the NBA, what matters in the NBA. And I would just basically greenlight the pitches that fit some of these story dynamics. And that was the magic sauce. So now I feel like let's use some of that moving forward. Let's double down on that, because I think that's really, if I were looking at a locker room full of college players and wondering, like, let's be honest, right now you're like, who's the highest scorer who looks good in a dramatic lit photo? And like, that's the person we're going to promote with that photo, right? That's pretty much how that goes. Or like, someone's holding the football or whatever. Like, yeah, okay. Like, maybe, that's better than like the fifth best player. I think you might want to look around the locker room and be like, who's struggling with something very real and relatable in here and has overcome it in some way? Or, I feel like I'm monologuing a lot here, but I was on the internet doing this so early that one of the emails I got was, hey, we're starting a new website. We think you might like it. You might want to include it in what you blog about. It's called YouTube. And I did. And like, in one of the first hits of YouTube, this is before Google, right? This was just independent company. Like, was I'm forgetting his name now, but like the manager who was like a special needs guy they checked him into a high school basketball game and he hit a 3. And the video of it was like, it just makes your heart leap with joy, right? And everybody loved it. Like, anything like that, anything where a normal, non-sports fan human can see the story and feel touched by it, put that in your program. The thing happens is, think about the rest of the locker room, right? Like, they're like, oh, this guy scored a bunch of touchdowns, so now he's going to be everyone's going to go to his locker, and that's all it's going to be. Whereas if you go over, like, meanwhile, in your heart, you're like, man, if they knew the real story, right? Like, the real thing's over here, or there, or something's happened, right? There's, like, real, capital R, real stuff, you know? If you're telling that story, the locker room feels more united, because you're like, you don't have, like, your secret set of stories over here, and you're you know, then, like, the whatever, you just chuck the fans with, like, the horse crap, you know, like that is palpable, right? It's palpable in body language to me. I feel like when I go in an NBA locker room, like, there's, you know, we're all crowded over at the locker room of LeBron or whatever, and you can see the rest of the team like, you know, like, if you guys knew, like, what was happening. And LeBron's like, I'll just say whatever you think I have to say. Like, you know, like this is tiring for me too. You know?
In my mind, if I were in your shoes, that would become my thing, right? And it sounds like the passion of what you're talking about, that became your thing. I understand. This is what people want to hear. This is what the audience hears. And the stories are real, and they're good stories, right? People doing their thing. You're branching off on your own now. And tell me a little bit about how that ties into what you're doing now.
So, TrueHoop, you can go to TrueHoop.com and see that there's, like, I'm off on this crazy voyage now. The current project that I'm really working on is the Brooklyn Nets are owned by an oligarch, Mikhail Prokhorov, who has a lot of surprising ties to this whole Trump scandal. This is the kind of thing that, like, you know, I'm friends with 100 people in this building right now who are amazing NBA sports writers, but nobody's really, like, dug into this before. And I'm like, I guess I gotta do it, you know? Unlike the William Wesley thing those years ago, like, now I'm, like, trying to really craft it like a story so that when you, like, read this scene, you have a feeling. I'm worried about how you feel. I don't care. I mean, I care much less about the information. It's more like I'm trying to manage the emotions of this. I've been trying to study that and learn about that and be an editor like that, and now I'm trying to be a writer like that. So that's the first project for me. There's several more in the pipeline. Got some LeBron stuff coming up. Got some my good friend David Thorpe is, like, he has the best set of eyes I've ever seen for just watching the basketball game and understanding real stuff that's happening out there. So he's contributing. He and I are both publishing about once a week, and then there's, like, other stuff is coming. I think we can build something pretty big. You know, we're going to go stage by stage, and we're not rushing to too much, but I want to be really honest. I want to be skilled with telling the kinds of stories you can't get anywhere else, and hopefully ones that are designed to make the audience really feel passionate about it. Turn people from readers into, like, evangelists.
Okay, my last question here. We're here at the 2019 MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. You talked about the research you did to figure out why storytelling was working and telling specific types of stories. Tell me how data plays into the whole aspect of storytelling and what you're doing now.
So I would say we're at a point now where I have used evidence. I've seen a lot of traffic reports, and they informed the decisions I made, right? And then we did an experiment, and it worked. And that's kind of like, we're not doing it right now, but I would really like to lead a team of, like, data scientists who really do this. So I don't think we're close to, like, algorithms creating stories. I think we're more close to, I mentioned already in the podcast, like, do you have a character in struggle, right? You could just test that. Ask yourself that question. Like, if you're talking about Hollywood movie scripts, I think you'll find close to 100% the answer is yes, right? If you talk about, like, what's in your local newspaper, it's probably 50% or 10%. If you talk about what's in your, like, PR written whatever, it's probably, like, 0.5% because they don't think struggle's cool. It seems vulnerable, right? So that's the big one, but there are hundreds more, and I'd love to kind of understand. You know, journalists really work with, like, oh, LeBron's famous. That'll be a good story. Does it have the word LeBron in the title? Like, I'm pretty sure that's a fairly useless analysis compared to what you could do in a world where some stories get 5 million readers and some stories get 5,000 readers, right? Like, that difference is so big that I feel like it's... Or another way of looking at it, actually, is This American Life. The podcast was, for years, the most listened to thing. You know, or I think I'm right in saying that more people downloaded and... downloaded, we don't really know who listened to. The whole first season of the podcast Serial, then watched the season finale of Game of Thrones. Like, it's about as popular as anything in the history of media, and it doesn't have celebrities, right? It's just amazing storytelling. Well, what are they doing? What's their menu? What's their like? We've got to get good at that stuff.
Right. Well, it sounds like to me, Henry, that you started something that you wanted to do. You figured out various formulas that work for you and formulas that actually work for audiences. And now you're branching off to yourself, on your own, and you want to take those formulas and actually bring audiences more, right? The storytelling thing is so important because you focus on NBA, but across all of college athletics, even high school athletics, storytelling is of the utmost importance. And my opinion here is I think you'll do well with TrueHoop.com, and I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure, Ty. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Henry Abbott. He's the founder of TrueHoop, and you can find more about him and his storytelling and what he's doing at TrueHoop.com. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.